Oh, hey guys, how are you doing? So, I thought we could have a little look at this Charlie Kirk video. And if you don't know who this guy is, he's basically a sort of American conservative, pretty popular. He's started a few companies and he's pretty big in America. So, I thought this particular clip was quite interesting because there's a few things I want to go over. And we're going to look at the question of has communism ever been tried, etc. So anyway, let's just jump into it and see what this young guy has to say.
I just want to start off by saying that it's always great to be politically active than to not be politically active. So I thank you for that. But I do want to start off by saying earlier I was outside protesting, as I usually do on campus, with a sign that says, "Tear the fascists down." Now, for those who don't know what fascism is, it's an ideology associated with Nazism. As I had this sign, not affiliating it to anybody, I had a group of...
So again, you've got this fashion of calling everybody a fascist. Now, a fascist is generally used as a sort of word meaning bad person, you know. The actual ideology, and it is like a proper ideology, is, to be honest, very, very out of date. It is a sort of a belief in a really big, powerful, centralized military government, which isn't democratic. It's, you know, very authoritarian. It's kind of like communism, basically, in that it's a totalizing system where everything is ruled by the government and basically nearly all the power is put into the hands of one dictator. So, you know, the actual number of fascists in the world is incredibly small. And yeah, it is just basically used as a pejorative. So this guy's like, you know, poisoning the world. Oh, I wouldn't call you that, you know, 70-year-old, 80-year-old out of date term. Sure. Okay, let's see what else he has to say.
Attending your event and called me the F word while at it. It's not lies. Now, I am not here to call you a fascist. I'm not. As I know you're not a Nazi sympathizer. You've never openly sympathized Nazism. I can see that.
Well, nobody does, for goodness sake. It is an out-of-date idea about the world. And to be honest, most American conservatives want a smaller government, whereas a fascist would want a really, really big government which controls everything, headed up by one guy, which again is similar to communism, where you end up with a really, really big government headed up by one guy. Both are pretty awful if you ask me, but yeah, apparently one of them is desirable according to this guy and the other one is terrible. Anyway, let's just let him speak. Why not?
People who openly call themselves fascists are here and are not afraid to admit they are fascists. So my question is, will you denounce fascism today, as the definition online puts it, as an ideology including racial nationalism and authoritarianism today?
Yes. Will you denounce Marxism as the greatest killer of human beings in the last 100 years?
Well, describe Marxism to me.
I'm sorry, what?
Describe Marxism to me.
The ideology that Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Lenin, and Pol Pot employed to the massacre of our...
It did kill millions of people, you're right, correct.
Okay, so I'll denounce fascism, you denounce Marxism, yeah?
Well, I would have to say, like, by definition... No. Hold on. So my thing is that, was it Marxism itself, or was it a materialistic condition that caused that? Because as Marxists, what we do say is that there's material conditions that contribute to society. Now, you probably aren't familiar with...
So he's saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with Marxism, it's just everything that happened under Marxism is bad. And, you know, Marxism is great, it's just the external forces which are holding it back. And he's going to go on to describe North Korea and having their factories burned or whatever. This was literally 80 odd years ago when this kind of stuff happened, you know. It was well, actually, it might have been a bit less time, but the point is you can rebuild factories and stuff. So I really don't see what's so great about the ideology, but it's just very popular in the States. And, you know, every year people say, oh, I'm a socialist, etc. Now, I think there are two different types of socialists, or at least two different types. There's the coffee shop socialists, which is basically the kind you find in the UK typically, and probably the US, and they might think, oh, we'll just have, like, public healthcare and stuff, and it'll be great. Then, you know, you actually have the hardcore who literally want everything to be owned and controlled by the government. And this guy probably doesn't really understand the theory very well, which is, you know, what we're going to explore.
With dialectical materialism, I'll try to explain it real quickly.
No, I've read the phenomenology of spirit, and I know Hegel. But
okay.
No, but tell me, but why not denounce Marxism? I mean, so Mao Zedong, Marxist, Lenin Marxist, Joseph Stalin Marxist.
I'll denounce Joseph Stalin for you, definitely, yes. Stalin was an authoritarian leader who definitely killed millions of Ukrainians. during the export of grain to, of course, build up their economy.
But there's nothing about, you don't think there's anything about the ideology that leads to the suffering, impoverishing, or the murdering?
Well, just like how Hitler called himself a socialist, it's not the ideology, it's just what you actually do in practice.
Yes, he did call himself a socialist.
Yeah.
But he was not a Marxist.
He was not, yeah.
But he was, there's national.
If you guys don't know, Marxism, well, socialism, I should say, used to have two very strong, distinct kind of flavors. So you have more of the sort of national socialism, obviously, which is pretty awful. A lot of people died. You have Marxist socialism, and you actually had various other kinds of socialism, especially before Marx came along. So there was actually quite a lot of divergence about how exactly you should run the place. And obviously when we think of socialism today or Marxism, well, the two are almost synonymous. We've kind of lost sight of the fact there was a lot of different types of ideology, which some of them are being explored, some of them maybe not.
National Socialist Workers' Party is the actual name of Nazism, but where has Marxism ever worked?
Well, I wouldn't say that Marxism itself has ever actually been tried. Now, of course, you can always say that's an easy communist getaway question to it, right?
Well, but Marxism has killed a lot more people than Hitler. Everywhere it's tried, it results in famine, impoverishing, death, destruction. I mean, every failed country on the planet right now, including North Korea, is some form of a Marxist dictatorship.
Well,
so why is it hard to denounce that? Because it's easier for me to denounce fascism. Why the struggle to just say, Marxism, bad, evil, end of story? Why can't we agree on that?
Well, because if you look at, I'll give the example of North Korea. What we did is that we went in there during the Korean War and destroyed all their factories, right? Now, what did this leave? This left an impoverished society where they now had no means to, of course, get their needs because their factories were destroyed. So that's...
Okay, that is a bit of a lie, because actually North Korea was a lot richer than South Korea after the war, and South Korea is obviously being very, very successful, and North Korea, quite frankly, struggles to feed a lot of its people. Sure, it's got a lot of military and a lot of technology, which is potentially very, very deadly. So if you're kind of measuring in military power, the South still has a lot more if you include the sort of American allies and whatnot. But yeah, that is a bit of a myth, because the North was actually richer after the war.
That's number one on why North Korea. Now, I don't like North Korea. I'm just saying that's one reason why.
Has nothing to do with the Marxist
No.
leader? Nothing?
He's not a Marxist leader. I wouldn't consider himself a Marxist leader.
So what I...
He actually is. Okay, they've taken on a bit of the Shinto belief system in emperor worship. But yeah, they do basically follow a lot of the socialist ideology.
Ideology is his.
So the ideology of Marxism is simply that workers own the means of production. The workers in North Korea do not own the means of production.
Would they have private property rights in North Korea?
They don't.
Then who owns the means of production?
The government does.
Oh, so yeah, I just got a cheese sandwich.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in a Marxist society,
that would be Marxism.
No, it's not, because the workers own the means of production, not the government.
But who is the government?
The government is the people, the bureaucrats.
Oh,
the bureaucrats who control the power.
Okay, and that would be the people, the bureaucrats owning the means of production, otherwise known as Marxism?
No. You're getting it all wrong. Literally, the word definition of Marxism is that workers own the means of production.
Right. So where has that ever been tried or worked? You say it's never been tried ever?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it. So even though the hammer and sickle and core Marxist ideology has been invoked repeatedly by these leaders, you're saying, no, not a Marxist. No.
Okay, so what the guy is saying here kind of makes sense if you don't really understand Marxism or the implications of it. So he is saying that the workers should own the means of production. So let's break that down. Means of production, basically for businesses that produce for goods and services, as well as for farms and everything else, should be owned by the workers. Now, the problem is, if you actually give the workers the means of production, they sell them and they get money for them, because quite frankly, workers don't really want to own a factory. They don't really want to own a farm or whatever, especially if you are in a difficult economic climate. So I thought I would kind of explain where this actually has been tried, this guy's utopia. So, The Birth of the Russian Oligarchs, a post-Soviet tale. Introduction. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, blah 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 blah. The fall of USSR. So in 1991, the Soviet Union, a vast communist state, collapsed, leaving behind a power vacuum and a struggling economy. The government transitioned from a centrally planned economy to a market-based one, a process known as privatisation. Okay, the voucher system. To kickstart the new capitalist era, the Russian government, under President Boris Yeltsin, introduced a scheme to privatise state-owned enterprises. In 1992, they distributed vouchers, or privatisation cheques, to every Russian citizen. These vouchers represented shares in state-run businesses, from oil companies to factories. The idea was to create a broad base of ownership amongst the Russian people. So, this is what the guy's talking about, really. He's talking about, the fact that the workers literally own the means of production. And this is exactly what happened. The workers, and pretty much everyone in the country, I should imagine most people were workers, would be given these shares in the various businesses. So, what happened? However, many Russians, unfamiliar with the concept of stocks and struggling to survive in a new economy, quickly sold their vouchers for cash. This is where the opportunists stepped in. A small group of savvy businessmen, often with connections to the old Soviet bureaucracy, began buying up these vouchers en masse. With their acquired vouchers, these individuals gained controlling stakes in some of Russia's most valuable companies at a fraction of their true worth. This process was facilitated by loans for shares auctions in 1995, where valuable state assets were sold at deeply undervalued prices in exchange for loans to the government. These auditions were often rigged in favour insiders. These auctions were often rigged for favour insiders. So yeah, it was a bit corrupt, but yeah, I mean, you kind of expect this. And I realised why people were selling these stocks and shares, because, if you are in an uncertain climate and everything's changing, and somebody says, hey, in 5 years' time, you might get a return on these stocks or whatever, or you can have a big bunch of money now, you're probably going to think, I'm going to take the money now, it's going to help my family survive, it's going to feed me today. But still, the workers were given the means of production, and they just ended up selling them, which is what would always happen pretty much, because people are going to want to buy these things and a lot of people are going to want to sell them. So this kind of makes you wonder, well, okay, if this is what happens when you give the workers the means of production, then maybe the means of production should be held for the workers by the government, whom they all love and worship, by the way, and then the government will own everything. And that's kind of what they dream of. But this is kind of why they say that the Workers' Party owns the means of production. As Kim Il-sung said, I think it was Kim Il-sung, he said that the workers belong to the Workers' Party, and the Workers' Party belongs to the Supreme Leader. Which again is kind of communism, socialism in a nutshell. My definition of these things is very simple, actually. Socialism is when half of the production of the people is controlled by the government, and communism is when all of the production of the people is controlled by the government. So both are pretty awful in my view. I'm very much the kind of capitalist here when I think that the government should be as small as possible, and it should do a few things really, really well, and tax should be low, and generally speaking, money should be given to the people. It should be freely traded. Anyway, key figures. So let's highlight a few key figures who emerged during this period. Boris Bezginovsky, initially an academic and mathematician, he became a powerful media mogul and political insider. Doesn't matter about the others, but consequences and controversies. So, in the late 1990s, these oligarchs wielded immense economic and political power. Their rise was marked by allegations of corruption, cronyism, ruthless business practices. The disparity between the newly wealthy oligarchs and the average Russian citizen grew stark, leading to widespread resentment. In the 2000s, President Vladimir Putin moved to curb the influence, with some oligarchs like Oh my god, here we go. Khodorkovsky facing imprisonment, whilst others like Berezovsky, sorry, fled the country. Despite this, the oligarch's legacy remains deeply embedded in Russia's political and economic landscape. So there we go. There's the story of when the workers were given the means of production. And let me just finish with a nice little tale about capitalism, because I love capitalism, right? It is basically the theory that the individual should be at the center of society. Every individual should have rights and power, and, you know, in a democracy, obviously, a vote as well. And power should basically be dispersed as much as possible. I'm very, very, very much against the idea of large, powerful organizations like governments basically making rules for everyone, trying to control everyone. I very much think that the wealth and success of the people should be in the hands of the people. And I also think that out of all the knowledge and expertise which is needed to run a successful country, 95% of that knowledge is in the hands of ordinary people, not in the hands of some bureaucrats or government elites. So yeah, I am a very, very kind of grassroots capitalist guy, I guess, because that kind of makes sense, you know? And it just seems like the more centralized power becomes, the less democratic it is, almost by definition. Because, okay, if you have 1,000 people and they vote in a leader, right, the wants and needs of those 1,000 people, they're all living in the same area, they're going to overlap with each other. But if you have a leader for, say, 1,000,000 people, there's no way you can promote the wants and needs of 1,000,000 people, right? It is way more difficult than if you have dispersed power throughout a lot more people. So yeah, don't put all the power in the hands of a tiny elite. Spread it out. This is kind of why I'm against any large institutions, any massive government. I actually think a lot of the success of America came down to the fact that they had dispersed power. So they had Washington, then they had all the different states and, you know, different governments for each who could operate kind of autonomously, having control over things like tax policy and whatnot. And, you know, people have the opportunity to move wherever they want to. And again, it was based around the fact that individuals had power and freedom. And, you know, there wasn't this sort of state control over everything. Because, okay, so let's say you have milk, lots and lots of milk, and you go to the great leader and you say, what should we do with all this milk, great leader? The great leader thinks, I think we should make tons of ice cream. Now, maybe it's successful, and, you know, maybe the ice cream's great, or maybe it's not successful and you end up with a lot of issues, and maybe there's a surplus of ice cream, you know, and maybe there's not enough people to eat it, for example, because you're sort of producing it on a massive scale. Maybe there's problems with refrigeration. It's very, very difficult. But if you give the milk to the free market and say, hey, we've got all this milk, what are we going to do with it? People are going to go, well, I'll have some of the milk. I'll turn it into cheese. Someone else might say, I'll buy some of that milk off you and I'll turn it into yogurt, for example. And, you know, you disperse power for other people. People end up actually using the milk far more efficiently than any dictatorship could, because people have all different kinds of ideas. Maybe they'll think, well, I'm going to make a special kind of cheese, you know, I'm going to make blue cheese. It's going to be sort of modelled on the French version of cheese. And, you know, maybe that's successful. Maybe it flops. The person who benefits if it's successful is the person making it. And the person who loses is, again, the person who tries it. But if the government tries something and it fails, the people who lose are everyone, right? Because, you know, you've kind of got all your eggs in one basket. Anyway, dispersed power is the way to go. I hope that was kind of interesting. Let me know what you think, and I will speak to you soon.